for 2 years.
I have been in tears for the last 2 years trying to meet my daughter, and she has never let me once talk to her or see her.
When I talked to him and told him I was pregnant.
I have had to create a fake Facebook account just to see pictures of Elena.
Mr. Henderson here claims that Ms. Nesbitt slept with their neighbor during the window of conception, and as a result, the child isn't his. What? This sounds so
Let's find out if the alleged baby father is right about his claim or simply needs to step up.
And we being with Judge Lake.
Ms. Nesbitt, you are suing to prove to Mr. Henderson that he is the father of your 7-month-old daughter, Zion.
Yes, Your Honor.
The accuser says her man doesn't take enough responsibility for their newborn, but he takes care of their 2-year-old son. However, he knows their older child isn't biologically his. But why take care of a child that isn't biologically yours, but neglect your responsibilities on a child that's biologically yours? Let's solve this puzzle together.
What has Mr. Henderson done so far for Zion?
Well, he buy her diapers, that's about it. He doesn't do anything for my child, but buy her diapers. He does more for my 2-year-old son that he knows that's not his, than his own daughter.
Really?
As the hearing continues, Mr. Henderson says he was at the hospital during the doctor's appointments and on the day of the child's delivery. Good for you, Mr. Henderson. We have seen a lot of crazy men in this court, and many of them do not even bother to turn up to their child's delivery.
Could have been mine, but she's not, so I felt kind of hurt. So
there's a level of resentment there.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Your Honor.
So what's your relationship like with Zion? Were you there through the doctor's appointments, birth?
Yes, Your Honor.
You were?
Yes, Your Honor.
You know that's your child. You've been knowing from the beginning. You signed the birth certificate.
Miss Nesbitt, however, cuts in saying he signed the birth certificate without her consent. She adds that she had told him a while before she gave birth that the baby might not be his. Also, he lied to his father about getting a DNA test at the hospital when he didn't. Just lies, lies, and more lies. But we are determined to get to the bottom of this case.
You even snuck down the stairs and signed it without my permission. You know the baby yours.
Yes, I did, because
He did what, Miss Nesbitt?
I went downstairs to go get my birth certificate and his name was on there. I told him not to put his name on there because I had doubts from the beginning, but he snuck anyways and signed his name on there.
Oh, so wait, you had asked him previously not to sign it.
Mr. Henderson defends himself, saying he lied to his father because he didn't want him to interfere with his business. Again, Miss Nesbitt cuts in, saying the defendant told her he signed the birth certificate because she wants custody of the baby. To justify his actions, the young man says he signed the birth certificate because he was trying to convince himself that he's the baby's father.
Well, honestly, Your Honor, because I didn't want him all in my business.
Oh, Your Honor, that's a lie. He signed the birth certificate. He told me that he signed the birth certificate so he can have rights of the baby, so he can get custody of the baby.
Well, listen, you understand when you sign a birth certificate at a hospital, you are acknowledging paternity legally.
Answering Judge Lauren's question, the defendant says he has doubts because the accuser had a habit of telling him the baby isn't his after she was born. One night, he came home drunk and she angrily admitted that the child wasn't his and could be their neighbor's. That is why you don't get too drunk, because you might find yourself in paternity court.
This not your baby, LaDon. Like one time
After Zion was born?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I came in the house one night drunk. I don't know if she was mad at me or not. She probably could have said it out of spite because I came in late. But I come in, she get the argument, oh, she's not yours, that's why she's not your baby.
Miss Nesbitt says Mr. Henderson slept with his cousin. They had a baby together, and that makes her feel vulnerable. Surprisingly, he admits he slept with his cousin, but it was before their relationship began. Continuing her statement, the accuser says she had unprotected sex with her man for a year prior to the pregnancy. However, she has doubts if the child is his because she slept with Mr. Brown 2 weeks before she got pregnant.
Certificate.
Yes, I had doubts.
What were your doubts specifically?
Well, let me tell you how it all began. He had sex with his cousin, and I felt very vulnerable about it. And you know.
Yes, I did, but that was before her. She already knew about that.
Okay.
Yes, let me tell you how
Proceed.
You know, I received the inbox telling me.
Apparently, the lady had sex with the neighbor because he comforted her after she got into an argument with Mr. Henderson. He gave her a nice leg massage, and that led to sexual intercourse. Although it happened once, it makes her have doubts about the baby's biological father.
Henderson, we got into an argument, and it led in my apartment hallway, and Mr. Brown seen, so he came to my door, he comforted me, and it led off to him coming in, giving me a massage, and led off to me, and it led off more than just the massage.
One night?
Yes, one night, and 2 weeks later I ended up pregnant, and I told Mr. Henderson.
Now, both men believe they are not responsible for the child's paternity and are eager to hear Judge Lauren read out the DNA test results. We have heard the testimonies from both parties, and I have got to say, this is really one thorny issue. The only way to solve it is to get the paternity test results.
Mr. Brown or Mr. Henderson is her biological father. It has been determined by this court. Mr. Brown, you are not her.
Oh!
Okay, sit down, Mr. Brown. We don't. Mr. Henderson, you are her father.
Told you was her father from the beginning.
Are you happy?
Mr. Webb claims Mrs. Forrest, the defendant, left him for dead while he was in a coma. However, getting out of coma, he discovers that she has a 2-year-old girl that is possibly his or her husband's. Mrs. Forrest is certain the baby is her husband's, who's also present in court. Is she right? Let's dig in.
Mr. Webb, you have been waiting 2 years for this day. You claim the defendant, Mrs. Forrest, left you for dead only to find out once you got out of a coma that she was pregnant and that the baby could be yours or her husband's.
Yes, Your Honor.
The defendant says she met Mr. Webb through a friend when Mr. Forrest was in trouble. Along the line, she left her husband for the accuser and they had unprotected sex countless times. Towards the end of their relationship, Mr. Webb was hospitalized and he found out she was pregnant through his aunt. Also, he says she called him while he was on his way to Illinois with his dad and told him about the possibility of the child being his.
We hit it off and then I ended up leaving Mr. Forrest for Mr. Webb.
So you began a sexual relationship?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and were you using protection at the time?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Webb, what is your take on this?
It didn't happen like that at first. Yes, we was in love.
Continuing his statement, the accuser says the defendant cultivated the habit of coming home late from work and unexplainable spending. That means she was seeing other men besides her husband. What do you think? Do you think Mrs. Forrest was seeing someone else? Well, let's find out.
And some of her check would be coming up missing every time she would get paid.
No.
And so what did you suspect? Because something was missing out of her check?
She would get off at 10 o'clock. It would take at least 15 minutes to get home, but she would come in at 11 to 11:30.
Mrs. Forrest denies the accusations and her husband backs her on. It's so rare to see such displays of loyalty in paternity court because husbands are usually not backing their wives in front of Judge Lake. Perhaps he's backing her because she was with him when she was meant to go home after work. There's only one way to find out.
Missing time and missing money.
Yes,
Where
Your Honor.
she was MIA.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
From where she worked at, and I know for a fact it took 45 minutes to get from her work
No,
to
Your Honor.
the house.
That's a lie.
And at the time.
No, Your Honor.
Because when I moved back.
So, Ms. Forrest, let me just ask you point blank. Were you sleeping with anyone else besides Mr. Webb and your husband?
Mr. Webb continues his statement saying Mrs. Forrest left him to be with Mr. Forrest while he was fighting for his life in the hospital. She dropped his belongings off at the hospital, and he found out through a letter from his mom. He claims he had no idea they had broken up at that time, but the defendant and her husband argued that his claims are false.
A letter from my mom where I was on life support when she came to drop off my stuff.
Which we were already broken up by then.
She had moved into a motel with Mr. Forrest.
This is evidence you'd like me to see?
This is a
Jerome, will you hand that
statement.
to me, please?
They broke up like 3 days.
According to Mr. Forrest, he and his wife got back together 3 days before Mr. Webb was placed on life support in the hospital. Mrs. Forrest claims she loved the accuser and tried to see him while he was hospitalized, but his mom wouldn't allow her. Isn't that hilarious? If she truly loved him like she claims, would she leave him the moment he needed her the most to be with another man?
By getting back together. Well, after they done broke up like 3 days before he ever went to the hospital.
No, Your Honor.
Bottom line is, he's in the bed on life support, and now you have reconciled with your husband.
Yes, Your Honor, but I tried to see him. His mother would not let me see him.
I'm sure there were some feelings because you had gotten back with your husband while he's fighting for his life.
It appears that Mrs. Forrest had unprotected sex with Mr. Webb on 25th of August before he went into health support. Also, she had unprotected sex with her husband on the 26th of the same month. Yeah, you heard that right. How can be so sure the baby is her husband's and not her ex-lover? We have a real dilemma in our hands. Let's get to the bottom together.
My daughter was born on May 9th of 2013.
Okay.
And then you take it back 9 months later. That takes it to the week of August 26th through August 31st.
August 26th through August 31st. You were sleeping with
just my husband.
The thing about it, Your Honor, is
Mr. Webb breaks into tears when explaining that she never allowed him to meet the baby, even though she told his family online that she could be his. He says there was a time she agreed to meet him with the baby, and he used his last $80 to fuel his car to meet them. However, when they were meant to meet, she changed her number and blocked him on Facebook.
Whenever she told me that I could meet Elena, I spent the last $80 I had to put in gas. She had backed out, changed changed her phone number, and blocked me on Facebook. 3 weeks later,
and that's like every number I get from you, it's always
changed. Try to
changed.
contact her to meet Elena.
It's difficult to tell who the baby's biological father is at this point due to the proximity of the days her mother had sex with both men. Hearing Judge Lauren read out the DNA test results is the only way to find out, and she has those answers that could put this case to bed. Let's get to it and find out the truth about this matter.
As to whether her biological father is Mr. Webb or Mr. Forrest, it has been determined by this court that her biological father is Mr. Webb.
Mr. Harper claims he's in financial trouble because he has been paying child support for a kid that isn't his. That's horrible if true. It is really difficult imagining a worse thing than being bankrupt for a child that isn't yours. We are soon going to find out if the young man is his son or not.
Mr. Harper, you say you are in financial shambles because you've been stuck paying support for a child you know is not yours.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you claim previous courts have denied your request for DNA testing because you allegedly signed an acknowledgement of paternity.
Yes, Your Honor.
Previous courts have denied him the rights to a DNA because he signed an acknowledgement of paternity. Today, he claims he has proof that he didn't sign those documents. Maybe there was really some strange hanky-panky at those courts. Let's find out if his proof is legitimate enough to back his claims.
You now claim to have evidence to prove you never signed that document.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Harper, you and your son, Mac Jr., claim Mr. Harper is denying paternity as an excuse for being a deadbeat father.
Yes, Your Honor.
Also, before the judge, Mrs. Harper and Mac Jr., her son, say the accuser is denying paternity as an excuse for being a disreputable father. Is this a case of a deadbeat father or an unfortunate man? As you know, in paternity court, it's often a case of both. There are very few saints here in this court, that is for sure. Anyway, let's find answers.
All right, so Mr. Harper, Sr., explain to me, how have you been affected by all of this?
Your Honor, I have been affected by this by first ending up in jail for 21 days.
Really?
Once questioned by the judge, Mr. Harper says he was wrongly locked behind bars for 21 days for being behind on $500 child support. He says the police came to his house and arrested him wrongly when he didn't even know he was meant to pay child support. Such a sad story, and now his freedom is in danger of being stripped from him because of this case.
You spent 21 days in jail because of failure to pay support, or you gotten behind?
Yes, I had gotten behind in my child support. The police came to my house one day, knocked on my door, and told me that I was behind in child support. At that time, I didn't even know I was supposed to be paying child support.
According to his statement, he was arrested without receiving a letter or notice before the arrest was made. And since then, he's been working hard to meet up with the child support. And we all know how difficult it can be to keep up with child support payments. Well, we may not all know, but Mr. Harper definitely knows for sure.
You never received a letter?
I never received a letter.
A notice?
Nothing, Your Honor. They came, locked me up. I went to court. They asked me if I could pay the money what I needed for court at that time, what they were saying that I was behind in.
How much did they say you were behind?
At that time, I think I might have been like $500 behind.
All right.
In child support.
However, Mrs. Harper says she was told the accuser is owing approximately $24,000 in her son's child support. Now that's a lot to take in if you have doubts of being the biological father to the child in question. But why does he doubt being Mark's biological father? Perhaps we will find out soon enough.
A story, because when they sent me a letter, they told me he was $25,000 behind.
So you're saying you've gotten a letter that says now he's upwards of $25,000 behind in support?
Yes, Your Honor.
It's either $23,000 or $25,000, somewhere like that.
Mr. Harper claims he has doubts about his alleged son's paternity because his family and friends told him his woman wasn't faithful to him. He adds more gasoline to the fire when he says someone tipped him off over the phone that she slept with one of his family members. Now that's interesting.
Doubts that Junior is mine, all because of the fact that back when me and his mother were, Miss Myrtle were together, I have family and friends that told me that she had been messing around with other men behind my back. Whenever I would go to work.
Your Honor, that's not true. That's not true.
Judge Lauren calls the accuser's attention to a paternity acknowledgement he signed, but he says it's not his. As it turns out, Mrs. Harper gave birth to Mark Jr. at home and went to the hospital afterwards. She claims the accuser was also at the hospital after she got there, and he signed the birth certificate. Also, the defendant claims she alone witnessed him sign it. This is confusing, but we'll get to the bottom.
You say you didn't sign that?
No, Your Honor. Whenever I got out there to the hospital, after she had him, because she had him at home.
You had Mac Jr. at home, Miss Harper?
Yes, Your Honor, but Mr. Senior came to the hospital, took pictures.
Mr. Harper admits he was at the hospital after Junior's mom took herself and the baby for checkups moments after the delivery. When he got there, he intended to sign the birth certificate, but Mrs. Harper said the doctors had to get the paperwork done before he got to the hospital so they could leave as soon as he came. Perhaps she signed it before he got to the hospital because they were legally married.
To see the baby after it was born.
I came there to the hospital to pick them up when they got ready to leave the hospital, because by being a home birth, when she got to the hospital, they checked the baby out. She called me like about 11 o'clock and was like, they're ready for us to come home. And so I was like, okay, I'll be over there after a while because I know I got to sign the birth certificate.
When asked about his opinion on the matter at hand, Mark Jr. says his father used to come pick him up over the weekend, but at one point he stopped. But the accuser says he stopped coming to pick him up because his mother and her boyfriend stopped him from coming. Wow, things are really starting to pick up here.
And he used to come pick me up when he was driving the cab. He used to come pick me up every weekend, and then all of a sudden he just stopped.
I stopped coming to get you, Junior, because of the fact that your mama and her boyfriend told me to stop coming to their house.
How can we get to the bottom of this case without hearing the judge read the DNA results? Not a chance. It's a classic crazy paternity drama here. And with all classic paternity court dramas like this, you just know that the DNA results are going to be very shocking. Hang on, because let's dig in.
Mr. Harper Sr., you are his father.
All right.
Now, will you please step up and be a dad to your son?
Yes, I will, if he'll allow me. If he'll allow me to, I'll be there for him.
You now have confirmed that he's in fact your biological father.
Today's court case is a father versus daughter situation. Miss Donna Alston appears before the court to prove to Mr. Holmes that he's her biological father. However, the defendant says he's not her daddy and that Mr. Alston, whose name is on the birth certificate, is her father. Let's dive in and get to the bottom of this crazy case.
Ms. Alston, you've come to court to prove to the defendant, Mr. Holmes, whom you first met at the age of 15, that you are his biological daughter.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Holmes, you say there's no way she's your child, and today the DNA will prove your case.
The accuser begins her statement saying her mom and Mr. Alston were married and they had 7 kids alongside her, so she grew up looking at him as a father figure. There are so many cases like this on paternity court, and they usually end so sadly because of age-long secrets. Let's just hope this one doesn't.
Well, Mr. Alston and my mom were married, so as a child, it all started there. I grew up in a home with my mom with my 7 siblings. So one summer I was going outside to play, and my mom was outside talking to a guy, and when I walked up, he was like, tell her.
But one day, while she was outside playing, her mom introduced a young man whom she had never met before that time to her as her uncle. Also, she met her kid brother, her grandmother, and the rest of the family, and they all accepted her like they knew each other a long time ago. Perhaps it's because blood is thicker than water. Well, let's not jump into conclusions yet.
And she looked at me and said, this is your uncle, this is your dad's brother. So I proceeded to meet the family, which is my younger brother, my grandmother, aunts and uncles, and they embraced me like if they knew me from day one. So I have always assumed that Mr. Alston was my dad.
She continues saying she always assumed Mr. Alston was her dad because his name is on her birth certificate. However, when she clocked 15, her mom told her there's a possibility that Mr. Holmes might be her father. Perhaps if her mother were alive, she could shed more light on the matter.
But at 15, she told me that Mr. Holmes can be my dad. He's always been a father figure to me since from day one, even with the doubt.
Mr. Holmes, you don't believe she's your biological child?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
When asked about his thoughts on his alleged daughter's statement, the defendant says he met her mother while she was in high school. They had sex 2 days after they met, and that went on without feelings attached. Hence, he doesn't believe he's her father. Also, he says he knew nothing about Miss Alston's mother, not until 15 years later when he found out she had a baby.
Because Miss Alston's mother, back in the day, she was like fat. And because I met her at the school bus stop. She was in high school. And 2 days later after I met her, I had sex with her. I called her again
Mr. Holmes claims he accepted her because he knows what it's like to grow up without a father, but he admits that he didn't put his all into it because of the way he met her mom and his lifestyle. Miss Alston's words are clearly not enough to convince the man she claims to be her biological father, but we know what would be enough: a DNA test.
Accepting of her.
I accepted her because I know how it feels to not have a father, but I didn't really put my all into it because, like, the way I met her mother and the lifestyle that I was already living.
As the hearing continues, the accuser says it felt wonderful when she met Mr. Holmes because she had abandonment issues. Meeting him made her feel what it's like to have a dad. But she's unhappy with Mr. Alston because he abandoned her, and we can all empathize with that feeling. It is definitely not easy dealing with abandonment.
Actually a good feeling for the kid in me because I've always wanted a dad. So it's actually great. I have abandonment issues from Mr. Alston, so it actually felt like I had a father who wants to love me for me. So it felt wonderful.
So
Mr. Holmes's mother steps to the podium to testify that the late Mrs. Alston came to her first to inform her that Miss Donna is her granddaughter. Once she heard that, she believed her story and told her son about it. However, she failed to mention that there's a possibility that other men could be her biological father too.
What do you have to add to this situation? What do you know about what's going on here?
Well, her mother came to me first, son's child. So I told John, I said, John, Donna is my grandchild.
And when her mother told you this, did she say or...
In addition to her statement, her son says it felt weird to find out he has a daughter 15 years after she was born. To him, he felt like he was being set up. Well, no one can blame him for feeling that way. That's just the way things go on paternity court. Judge Lake uncovers truths and you get to feel their impact.
And when I found out after 15 years, like, it's like, hold up, what's somebody set me up being funny or something?
2 months, 3 months. You ever been there when any of them were born?
With all my kids, with all of them. I got 7 with all my kids.
Wow.
I mean, it's like I'm being set up, you know what I'm saying? Or
once Mr. Alston is invited to the courtroom to testify, he acknowledges that Miss Donna is his daughter. However, the young woman says, although he claims she's her daughter, he's never treated her like she's his. His response is that she's mad at him because he remarried, and whenever she called him, it was always about money. If he couldn't give her money, he got disrespected. Now is Miss Alston having daddy issues or money issues?
Your daughter?
Yes, that's my daughter. There's no way in the world I would not think that.
Excuse me, Your Honor. He calls me his daughter sitting here, but he's never been a dad to me. He's never been a dad. I don't recall no phone calls.
But she says she tried to have a relationship.
It seemed like all that. That's when the anger started coming through.
Apparently, Mr. Alston believes Donna is his, but she thinks Mr. Holmes is her father. However, Mr. Holmes doesn't think he is. This is one hell of a crazy paternity court drama. The only way to find out who the accuser's real father is through a DNA test. Let's find out the test results together.
You are not Miss Alston's father. Mr. Alston, you are not Miss Alston's father.
Why'd she do that?
Lord have mercy.
You still my grandpa.